Decoded.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Book Decoded. Have you ever, stopped to think about the crazy journey your morning coffee cup took to actually get to you?
It's amazing, isn't it?
Or how about that roll of toilet paper that everyone was freaking out about a few years ago?
Oh, yeah, that was wild.
Well, buckle up, because today we're going to be diving into Your Life is Manufactured by Tim Minshall, a book that will completely change how you see the world.
Literally.
Literally, yeah. What I think is so cool about this book is that it shows you the connections between these everyday things we use and this massive world of manufacturing. You don't really think about it, but all of our consumption habits actually drive this huge global system.
Absolutely. And it's eye-opening to peel back the curtain and see how it all works.
Yeah, and Minshall, who's a total expert in manufacturing engineering, he takes us behind the scenes of it all.
He really does. From, like you said, everyday stuff we take for granted to these mind-boggling things like electric vehicles and even spaceships.
Well, it's great.
It's a real adventure.
It is. And he writes in such a clear and engaging way, too.
Yes.
He even uses personal anecdotes.
Yeah.
Do you remember that story about him almost starting a riot in a school assembly?
Oh, yeah, when he was trying to show the kids how to put together a laptop.
I was laughing out loud reading that part. It's so true, though. Most of us have no clue what goes into making even the simplest things.
Right. We just take it for granted.
Totally. And that kind of sets the stage for this bigger question the book explores about how fragile our modern manufacturing systems actually are.
Remember those empty shelves at the supermarket during the pandemic?
Oh, yeah.
He uses that actually as an example, especially the toilet paper shortage.
That was rough.
It was. And it shows how globalization and this constant push for efficiency have actually created some serious vulnerabilities in the system.
Yeah, it's like we've optimized for speed and low cost, but totally forgot about building in any resilience.
Exactly. He talks about lean manufacturing, which is designed to eliminate waste.
Yeah.
Like having extra inventory. But ironically, that actually contributed to those shortages.
That's so interesting. It seems kind of counterintuitive.
It is. It's like this fascinating paradox. By stripping away all those safety nets to be more efficient, we actually made the whole system much more vulnerable to disruptions. And to really hammer this point home, he takes us on this epic journey following a bicycle as it travels 20,000 kilometers from made in China to someone's doorstep.
Oh my gosh, yes, that part is mind-blowing. He walks us through the world of shipping containers and these massive cargo ships and these bustling ports. It's like this whole hidden world that most of us never even think about.
It's incredible.
It makes you really appreciate all those little steps involved in getting that thing you ordered online to your door. The raw materials, the factories, the transportation, the packaging, it's crazy.
It really is a symphony of coordinated effort.
It is. It makes you wonder about the journeys of everything we use every day.
Yeah.
Our phones, our clothes, the food we eat.
Absolutely. Every single thing has its own incredible story.
Speaking of incredible stories, the book dives deep into the surprisingly complex world of toilet paper manufacturing.
Now, that's not a topic you hear every day.
Definitely not. But he makes it fascinating. He explains how they plant millions of trees, then they harvest them and process them using huge amounts of water and energy, all for that one little roll we take for granted.
And it's not a small operation by any means.
No. He describes this massive paper rolling machine called PM7 that's the length of 6 football pitches and weighs 30,000 tons.
It's a true marvel of engineering.
It is. It really puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
And it leads to some important questions about sustainability, which we'll definitely get into. But before we go down that road, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about something a little more high-tech.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going with this.
Electric vehicles.
Yes. The book actually delves into the history of EVs, which goes all the way back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Oh, wow.
Did you know they were actually pretty popular back then?
No, I had no idea. I thought it was a much more recent thing.
You'd be surprised. But then they kind of disappeared for a while, and Minshall explains how a bunch of factors contributed to their decline. Technological limitations, and then things like psychological barriers that people had.
Is range anxiety.
Exactly. People were worried about running out of charge. And it's amazing how those perceptions have stuck around, even though EV technology has come so far.
It's true.
It shows how much psychology plays a role in adopting new technologies, even in manufacturing.
For sure. But then along comes Tesla, right?
Yes. A company that completely disrupted the entire automotive industry.
They didn't just build electric cars. They built a whole brand that challenged the status quo.
They did. And they sparked a global shift toward electric mobility.
It's a classic example of how a newcomer with a bold vision can shake up an entire industry. And it had a ripple effect, too, right?
It did. It pushed other car companies to start making their own EVs, and even forced governments to rethink their policies about transportation and sustainability.
It's proof that manufacturing doesn't just reflect the world. It can actually change it.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of shaping the future, I'm dying to hear about these factories of the future Minshall describes. They sound like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Well, get ready because they're pretty incredible. He uses the Zeekr EV factory in China as an example of a smart factory.
Smart factories. What does that even mean? Are we talking like robots wearing lab coats?
Well, not quite, but it's pretty close. Imagine artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and big data all working together to optimize the manufacturing processes.
Wow.
Machines talking to each other, data analysis happening in real-time production, fine-tuned for maximum efficiency. It's really something.
That's amazing. So it's like a factory where everything is interconnected and production can be customized for each customer. Manufacturing on demand.
Exactly. But like with any major technology, there are potential downsides.
Right.
Minshall talks about the challenge of job displacement as automation increases.
Yeah, that's a real concern.
It is. He reminds us that we need to find ways to make sure these transitions are fair for everyone.
It's a good point. Technological progress isn't always a simple win-win.
Right. We have to think about the social and economic impacts, too.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of manufacturing that Minshall emphasizes: sustainability. Okay, let's talk about the environmental impact of all this manufacturing. We've kind of touched on it throughout our conversation, but it's a major theme in the book.
It is. And he doesn't sugarcoat the negative consequences of traditional manufacturing, like waste pollution and resource depletion. Our current system, as efficient as it is, simply isn't sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, we can't keep consuming and producing at this rate.
So the question is, what's the alternative? How do we make the things we need without destroying the planet? And that's where this idea of a circular economy comes in.
Okay, so remind me what that is again.
It's a model that aims to eliminate waste by designing products for durability, repairability, and reusability. Imagine a world where products are made to be easily disassembled so their parts can be reused or recycled.
So instead of the linear take, make, dispose system, it's more like a loop where resources are constantly flowing back into the system. That's a pretty big change from how we do things now.
It is. But he gives some great examples of companies and initiatives that are already putting these principles into practice. He even highlights the impact of something as simple as choosing to repair your old phone instead of buying a new one.
It's true, those little choices can make a difference.
They do. But it sounds like we need more than just individual action. We need system-wide change.
Totally.
And that brings us to an even more radical concept that he introduces: regenerative manufacturing.
Regenerative manufacturing, what is that? Like factories that magically turn pollution into clean air and water?
It's not magic, but it's pretty close.
Yeah.
The idea is that manufacturing can actually go beyond minimizing harm and have a net positive impact on the environment. He uses examples like factories that produce clean water or energy as byproducts of their operations.
Wow, that's an incredible vision.
It is.
So we've been talking about how our manufacturing system is super complex and not very sustainable, but how do we actually change that? How do we go from this wasteful model to a more circular one?
Yeah, that's the big question. And Minshall says it starts with us, the consumers. We have to understand what people actually want and need, because what's the point of making something if nobody's going to buy it?
Right, it's all about supply and demand.
And he uses some really interesting examples to show this point. Like he talks about the challenges that a shoe factory faces when they're trying to figure out what styles will be popular next season.
Oh yeah, fashion is so fickle.
It is. So imagine you're running this shoe factory. You want everything to be smooth, predictable production, happy suppliers. But then you have to factor in all the changing trends.
Yeah, one day everyone wants neon sneakers. The next day it's all about vintage boots.
Right. It's a lot to keep up with.
It is. And then there's that example with Cadbury, the chocolate company.
Oh, yeah. They're trying to predict demand for their creme eggs.
Those are so good.
They are. But even with all their data, it's still a guessing game.
Because there are so many things that can impact demand, right?
There are. Things like the weather holidays, even a global pandemic. All of those things can affect how many creme eggs people are craving.
I mean, who doesn't want a creme egg during a pandemic?
So manufacturers are always trying to find this balance between how much they can produce and what consumers actually want.
It's a tough job.
It is, and sometimes, let's be honest, they try to influence our desires through marketing and advertising.
Oh, for sure. They're really good at convincing us that we need that new gadget or that trendy outfit.
They are. And that brings us to a really important example that Minshall talks about: fast fashion.
Oh, yeah. Fast fashion has been getting a lot of attention lately.
And for good reason. The environmental and ethical costs are huge. He talks about all the textile waste that ends up in landfills and the terrible working conditions in some factories. It's a reminder that our obsession with cheap clothes comes at a price.
A big price.
Yeah,
We really need to be more mindful about our shopping habits and think about where our clothes come from and what happens to them when we're done with them.
absolutely. But it's not all doom and gloom. The book also highlights some positive changes that are happening in manufacturing.
Okay, good. I need some good news.
Remember those smart factories we talked about earlier?
With the robots and AI and all that.
Yeah. Well, Minshall explains how those technologies can actually be used to make manufacturing more sustainable.
Oh, that's interesting. I always think of robots as being kind of cold and impersonal, but maybe they can help save the planet.
They can. We're talking about things like reducing waste, using energy more efficiently, incorporating recycled materials.
So technology can be a force for good.
It can. Which leads us to a really important question. What can we do as individuals to push for more positive change in the manufacturing world?
Yeah, because it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of these problems. Like, what can one person really do?
You'd be surprised. Minshall says we actually have more power than we realize. He encourages us to be more conscious consumers and make informed choices about what we buy.
So, like, supporting companies that are trying to be sustainable, buying less stuff in general, repairing and reusing things whenever possible.
He even suggests doing a little research before you buy something. Look into the company's practices, see what materials they use. Think about how long the product will last and what will happen to it when you're done with it.
It's about thinking long term instead of just buying the cheapest thing.
Right. And beyond our own choices, we can also advocate for change on a larger scale. We can support policies that promote sustainable manufacturing, hold companies accountable for their actions, talk about these issues with our friends and family.
It's about individual action and collective effort.
We all have a part to play in creating a better future. And speaking of the future, the book dives into a particularly important area: healthcare manufacturing.
That's a topic that's close to all of our hearts, especially after everything we've been through with the pandemic.
Absolutely. And Minshall's insights are so relevant now. He starts by explaining how medicines are developed and manufactured, which is a super complex and tightly regulated process.
Yeah, it's no wonder it takes so long for new drugs to get approved.
It's true. And he even highlights the challenges of getting those life-saving medications to the people who need them, especially in remote areas. He tells this fascinating story about how the Tanzanian government partnered with Coca-Cola to improve their medicine distribution system.
Wait, Coca-Cola? Like the soda company?
Yes. They used Coca-Cola's existing distribution network, which is incredibly efficient to get medicine to people in even the most remote villages.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that Coca-Cola could be a model for delivering medicine?
It's a great example of thinking outside the box and using what we already have to solve problems.
I love that.
But then he takes things a step further and explores this idea of personalized medicine.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. It's like medicine that's tailored to your specific DNA, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine treatments that are designed just for you to be as effective as possible with minimal side effects.
That sounds like science fiction.
It does,
Right.
but it's getting closer to reality. He talks about some of the amazing advancements that are happening in this field, like using 3D printing to create personalized drug delivery systems.
Wow, 3D printing is everywhere these days.
It is. It's such a versatile technology.
But with any new technology, there are always potential downsides. What about the cost of personalized medicine? Will everyone be able to afford it?
Those are really important questions, and Minshall acknowledges that personalized medicine could be very expensive. He says we have to figure out how to make sure it's accessible to everyone.
It's like we have to be careful that technology doesn't just benefit the wealthy.
You're exactly right. And then he takes us back to the beginning of the pandemic and reminds us how fragile our healthcare supply chains actually are.
Oh man, those were scary times. Remember the shortages of masks and gloves and even ventilators?
It was a wake-up call for sure. He uses that example to show what can happen when those global supply chains are disrupted. But even in all the chaos, there were also stories of incredible resilience and innovation.
Like those people who started making PPE with 3D printers in their garages.
Yeah. And he talks about how big companies like Airbus and Formula One teams converted their factories to make ventilators. It was really inspiring to see people coming together to help.
It shows what we can accomplish when we work together.
Absolutely. And Minshall says those experiences taught us some important lessons about healthcare manufacturing.
Like, we need to be more prepared for future pandemics.
Right. We need to think about producing things locally, building more resilient supply chains, and having enough stockpiles of essential items.
Makes sense.
He even suggests that hospitals could learn from manufacturing principles and use things like lean management techniques to be more efficient.
That's an interesting idea, though I'm not sure all doctors and nurses would be thrilled about comparing a hospital to a factory.
Maybe not. But the point is that we can learn from other industries and use those lessons to improve our healthcare system.
That's a good point. So we've talked about toilet paper, electric cars, factories of the future, and even healthcare. And I'm starting to see a connection between all these things.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It's like everything is connected: our daily lives, the products we use, the systems that make them, and the impact those systems have on the environment. It's all part of this big web of manufacturing.
You got it. That's one of the main messages of Your Life is Manufactured. We need to recognize those connections, understand the complexity of the systems we rely on, and think about how we can create a more sustainable and fair future.
It's a powerful message. And it sets us up perfectly for the book's exploration of the future of manufacturing. So where do we go from here? What does the next chapter hold?
We've talked about a lot of different things, but now it's time to get into the really big picture stuff. The future of, well, everything.
Yeah, Minshall doesn't shy away from those big questions.
Yeah.
He brings up this idea that the very systems that we depend on for, like, our food and shelter and clothes are the same ones that are now threatening the planet.
That's kind of a scary thought.
It is. And he uses some pretty powerful examples, like the sheer amount of food that we waste globally. Did you know that almost 40% of all the food that's produced ends up in the trash?
That's insane, especially when you think about how many people in the world don't have enough to eat. It's a huge problem. The good news is that Minshall doesn't just point out the problems, he also offers solutions.
Okay, so what does he suggest?
Well, remember that idea of a circular economy that we talked about earlier? He really believes that that's the key to a more sustainable future.
Right, like designing things to last longer, reusing and recycling as much as possible. Maybe even shifting to a system where we pay for using things instead of owning them.
Exactly. And he talks about companies that are already doing these things, which is really encouraging. But he stresses that we need a much bigger change in our mindset. We can't just keep doing things the way we've always done them.
It's like we need a total paradigm shift, not just a few tweaks here and there.
That's right. And he knows that a change like that won't be easy. He talks about things like what happens to jobs as automation increases and how we can make sure that everyone benefits from these changes, not just a select few.
We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix things.
Right. He wants us to see manufacturing not as the bad guy, but as a potential force for good in creating a more sustainable and just world.
Wow. So it's like a complete reframing of how we think about manufacturing.
It is. And honestly, this book has been so eye-opening. It's made me think about all the things we use every day in a whole new way.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's like it's pulled back the curtain on this hidden world that we all rely on but don't really understand.
And it's shown how everything is connected from our own personal choices to these huge global systems.
If you're at all curious about how the world works and how we can make it better, this book is a must-read.
I agree. It'll make you think differently about everything you buy and everything you use.
So go check out Your Life is Manufactured by Tim Minshall. You won't regret it.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of Book Decoded.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a book that's changing the way we think about the world. Until then, keep those minds curious, and remember, the future is being manufactured right now, and we all have a hand in shaping it.